Yep.
All right.
And I won't.
I guess I'll start now. So my name's Jamie. This is food/service deserts. It's probably a term you've heard before, food desert. Service desert is a bit lesser known of a term. But basically I'm going to go over what this means, what the impacts are, what the causes might be, what some solutions might be, and some overall statistics. And then we're also going to have a discussion about what you guys think some of the causes will be later. And then go ahead and ask any questions you want anytime during the presentation as well. So food and service deserts, basically this means anywhere in a low income area that has scarce groceries and fresh food. That's a food desert. A service desert is anywhere that is scarce in services and businesses such as like car mechanics and lawyers and other services that would be necessary in a local community. So this is the definition that Google says, but there's actually three different parts of what a food desert is, and that's wealth, access to food, and actually transportation. So what makes a food desert isn't just that there's a lack of food. The important element is that there's a lack of access to the food, which means people have trouble actually getting to grocery stores with transportation, or they're too poor to afford the transportation or investing in grocery stores. And then service desert is actually not an American term. It's pretty much only used when I researched it in Germany. I don't know how to pronounce it, but it's like service locked or something. It's a German term that basically just means what it says here. It's like scarce in any kind of resource that would be considered a valuable service in a neighborhood. Germany is the most famous country that's known to be a service desert. So the official definition of a food desert is actually provided by the USDA, which stands for Department of Agriculture, United States Department of Agriculture. So the requirements to be actually defined as a tract with a food desert definition is you need to have at least 500 people or 33% of the population being more than 1 mile from a supermarket. So as you can kind of see, a food desert isn't a lack of all food. There can be definitely restaurants and fast food chains, but it means a lack of fresh food and healthy food. So it's definitely specific to supermarkets and groceries that you'd find in a neighborhood normally. And so what you'll find with food deserts is often there's actually a lot of restaurants and fast food chains. One statistic that we'll get to later is that convenience stores and corner stores and fast food chains are actually a lot more prevalent in food deserts than normal neighborhoods, whereas obviously there's a complete lack of fresh food. And then also for rural neighborhoods, you might be thinking, there's plenty of people that live in farms and other places that there's no way they could possibly be 1 mile from a supermarket. So there's actually adjusted rule for that, which is you need to be 10 miles from a supermarket or grocery store in order to be considered a food desert, which is why on this map you'll see here, which hopefully that definition gives some context. So this is a map. The darker it is, the more percentage of people have no supermarket near them within a mile radius and no car. So as you can see, obviously this is a very rural area, the Deep South. Louisiana is the New Orleans is the top city for food desert neighborhoods. So as you can see, it's pretty distributed around the country. It's not just a third world country.
Is it simply a map of no car, no supermarket within a mile, or does the 500 limit also apply?
Yeah.
Because so it's no car, no supermarket within a mile for 500 people.
Yes.
Because if you would think that in the West, you would be more further away from stores. Well, I'm just thinking like Point Reyes, right?
Well, as I
like
say,
if you live in one of the ranches on Point Reyes, like you are more than 10 miles away from a supermarket, for sure. And there's no bus and there's no like.
But you might have a car.
Yeah, so that would represent about a little less than 2.5% of the state. So as you can see here, it's not zero. There is some area of especially Northern California where there are small places
Oh, I see, okay.
that,
So,
that are missing that. It does
Yes.
follow the rule of the 500 or 33% of the population.
okay.
But as I say, it's like the rule is adjusted for 10 miles to a mile depending on urban versus rural areas. So here's a zoomed in version of this. I couldn't find a high resolution image, but it's a good way to see how our neighborhood is affected by food deserts. This is basically the same statistic, including
It's insane.
vehicles. But as you can see, the worst area, this would be right here, and then the Bay View is definitely heavily affected by it. I'm not exactly sure what's going on right here.
Where?
You mean like
Right,
Ocean
like
Beach
underneath.
area?
Yeah, but it's not really Ocean Beach. It's like there's
No,
not-
it is. It's
Yeah.
it's
not the
out.
whole
It's
thing,
the outer.
like-
It's the outer Sunset.
It is that area, but it's not just. So it's not just the strip of sand, is what I'm saying. It's like there's a specific area that they've marked out to be.
Yeah, it's because there's no store anywhere. It's all residential.
No,
And
they're
then you
not
get like,
including
and then
the-
you get the Western Edition in the middle. And it's just like.
Yeah. Well, I don't think they're including the like landscape in this statistic. Otherwise, all the mountains would be, red. But for residential areas, yeah, it's interesting to see how big.
And what's the meaning of the orange versus green versus red?
So green is less impacted by food desert. There's different degrees of it, as in
Got it.
how far they are from supermarkets and how much of the population has no car or anything like that. Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, can you go back to the previous slide?
Yeah, sure.
So you were saying that these are areas where like there's like no, I guess like organic healthy foods or whatever, like within,
Yeah.
how many?
For at least 33% of the population. So some of these people definitely have that, even in the red areas, but it means that 10% of this neighborhood is considered food desert.
So, and if you could go to the next slide.
Uh-huh.
So where is that area in San Francisco? That's like the very red.
Western Edition?
That's the Western Edition.
Maybe the Mission.
Yeah, so this is, yeah.
No,
Oh.
Mission.
Well, no, Mission's
South
a bit
Market.
southwest
Mission's
of
a
that.
bit south.
So it's like
South
probably,
Market.
yeah.
So, wait, so
I mean,
Yeah,
Market-
it's
Market
actually
is like-
Tenderloin and
Market
Western
cuts
Edition.
right through it.
Yeah.
Because it's over Van Ness, right? It's over
Yeah.
like it goes
Yeah.
over Van Ness. So it's,
I'd say like
What about
Civic
Target?
Center-ish.
yeah.
The Everbrook.
Knoll is
Yeah, go ahead.
but up further
What's
north.
the mile radius again where it's like to be considered a food desert?
So
or like
just 1 mile. It's different in every country, every place, but basically the official definition by the Department of Agriculture is that 1 mile means no supermarket or vehicle within a mile means that. it's
Right. So
food
think if you're at
10
Civic
miles
Center,
in a
if you're
row.
at Civic Center, like where's the nearest supermarket near the Civic Center? And it's like you start looking,
Castro,
right?
maybe.
So there's a Safeway on Market, but it's done near Castro. There's a Safeway in the Western Edition on Fillmore, but that's far from.
but wouldn't
That's
you
far
say
from.
that there's public transportation to bring you there?
And like,
Yeah, I mean it's again it's
But-
like not doesn't mean.
But
100%
it said
of the
no
population.
car. It said no. It said no car. So it's also
Right.
people
oh, I
who
thought it
without.
was no transportation.
No, it just means that transportation is difficult, especially lugging groceries
Oh,
on
yeah,
a bus is
true.
difficult. A lot of these people have to walk to their houses from the public transportation. Some of these areas in Oakland, as you can see, it's a lot more heavily impacted than San Francisco.
Mhm.
Public transportation is definitely not as prevalent there. The map is not covering all the neighborhoods.
Yeah, it's interesting.
as
Alameda
heavily.
is like
So-
super impacted.
Right, so transportation is definitely a lot harder. And then the other thing is, while this definition is exact with the USDA, there's actually other, people also measure it in terms of grocery stores and corner stores that sell healthy food, so
Mhm.
it's not just, Whole Foods and Safeway.
There's one in Marin. Where is that? Like above Sausalito?
That's in Marin
I'm not-
City.
That's Marin City.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
Marin City.
Yeah,
There's
there
a
would be-
Target. They have produce. Sus.
yeah, I
Maybe
guess.
this was before that Target opened because that opened pretty recently.
It
It used to be Best Buy.
Alright,
Yes.
I'm gonna
Alright,
move on to the
Jerry
next slide.
knows.
Jared
Okay,
Oh,
does.
wait,
so
the one on-
here's some statistics. I
in
hope
Marin
this will
City.
sort of demonstrate how big of an impact this is having on people. So, over 23.5 million Americans are living in an official food desert. 8% of African Americans have a supermarket in their tracts. So a tract, by the way, is like can be anywhere from 8 blocks neighborhood to the full neighborhood. So actually only 8% of African Americans have a supermarket, and 30% of white people do. The official statistic that everyone seems to have a consensus on is that 2.2% is the official number of households. That's just households, not people, that are a mile away. But it actually gets up to 5.5% when you include half a mile to a mile. So when you go back to this orange map, you can see this is kind of representative of 2.2% of all households in the US, which is, I think, a pretty big number. The other thing that I was alluding to before is that low-income zip codes have 30% more convenience stores than middle income, which kind of goes to show it's not just about a scarcity in food, it's also about fast food chains taking advantage of this and sort of coming in and selling their unhealthy food. And this can have a big impact on the community where obesity goes rampant and people are uneducated in terms of buying food, so they'll often resort to the more convenient fast food than going all the way on public transportation to get supermarket food. So this is definitely a big health issue and a big contributor to obesity in America. Okay, so here's another interesting thing that I found as an impact of food deserts, which is it's actually a sort of a cycle. So down here, this is what you can buy at a supermarket. So you can see lots of fruit, lots of eggs, cereal, all the food you need for probably like 2 weeks for 2 people, or 1 week for a whole family. This is the same amount of money, but at a convenience store, at a corner store that you could get in a place like a food desert where this would be the only option. So basically, a lot of these people have the choice between going really far just for this, or going, next door to their corner store to get this. So it kind of goes to show, prices when demand for healthy food is so high, the supply, and the supply of it is so low in food deserts, that would make the prices go a lot up.
Yeah, can I just add two things? One is just to go back over your previous point about like the lack of education regarding to food. Interestingly enough, a lot of people who live in food deserts actually know more what to do with all kinds of various vegetables than the people in the sort of upper class, just because they often come from a place in the world where they know how to use all of the food as opposed to some of the food, like vegetables, like learning how to do the roots and the leaves and just different ways. It's just that they don't have an option to buy it. So it's not often a education share, it's a question of just availability. And
yeah, exactly.
As far as this is concerned, this is something that was a revelation to me. I should have known, but 2 years ago this class went to the Western Addition, and we had a tour in the Western Addition, and there used to be a big corner store, a big convenience store in the Western Addition. And what the person said, what was interesting, is that actually having a supermarket is often not the solution that's needed for the population there. And the reason for that is supermarkets, while they're cheap, right, sell in bulk. And oftentimes the people there don't have the ability to handle bulk, or they don't have the money that it would take to buy bulk. So like they might be able to buy, 3 slices of ham, but they might not be able to buy per day, but they might not be able to buy 15 slices of ham, which is what you would buy in a packet of ham, which you would buy at a supermarket. And so this idea that small convenience stores, delis, sell smaller quantities at a higher price, but smaller quantities, is more convenient for those, can be either more affordable or convenient for the families there. And that was interesting for the Western Addition, and thought that one through. I'd say, bring a Safeway in, but in fact, sometimes Safeway, it's like if I had to go and buy at Costco, I don't know what I would do with all the stuff I would buy at Costco. I literally don't have enough storage space to store 15 rolls of toilet paper, right? I need to buy 1 roll of toilet paper, not 15. And so then the question is same thing for chicken, or I don't need 15 breasts of chicken. I just need 1 chicken breast for my family tonight.
Yeah, I'll actually touch on that later. It's part of the solutions is that, as you say, a lot of people are actually becoming a lot more aware. There have been, I have watched a few documentaries about the obesity crisis, and it seems like in the early 2000s, a lot of the reason for that huge spike is the education, but now that people are getting more aware of what they need and how they can get it, it's changing for the better. And then in terms of supermarkets, yeah, that's definitely why it's a very tricky subject, because also supermarkets can push out small businesses and people can get, can lose their jobs, or prices can inflate too much with big corporations. And a lot of these corporations have price matching, so that small corner stores can't match these prices of the cheap food. So it's very complicated to get a supermarket in general that can do good for the community. And then there's also the element, which I'll talk about a bit later, of supermarket taxes. It's actually pretty expensive to have taxes in a low income neighborhood when you're a supermarket, so they're actually being discouraged from coming to that neighborhood. So yeah, but I'll touch on that later a bit more. But the main idea is that a lot of these people are stuck between either high prices for less food or low prices for, a pro-con supermarket that might not even be good for their neighborhood. So now we're going to have a bit of discussion before I talk about the causes. I want you guys to think about causes yourselves and kind of discuss, what might cause this. And in terms of service deserts, what would have to happen in a city to neglect a neighborhood enough to not have enough businesses? What factors would cause that? And so yeah, we're going to spend a little time where you can just sort of Socratic seminar type.
Well, I feel like redlining probably played a big role in it, because companies or businesses were less likely to invest in those communities that they wouldn't have as much of a profit in. Service deserts, kind of the same thing. I just want to touch on a solution really quick. Something that like my town is doing, San Rafael, is like kind of building more gardens for low-income, underprivileged communities, that they can have access to these kind of healthy foods. And I feel like that's one way that communities can kind of get back on their feet and tackle food deserts in that sense.
So, are they encouraging like kind of self-sufficiency in the?
It's kind of like the Tenderloin Garden next to City Hall.
Yeah.
It's kind of, yeah.
Same thing is happening in New York, where they're taking empty lots and transforming into gardens, and people suddenly can actually have access to food, and they're growing food that grows better than our traditional food here.
Like what food?
Tubers and leafy greens and so high so the high caloric food that are reasonably healthy and grow fast and are cheap.
How was that managed though? Like, cause like couldn't potentially like a family or something like just like going and be like, oh, like I need all this food for my family, and like just like kind of take a whole bunch of it.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. Again, that's happening in New York, it's happening in Boston. I was involved with that program in Boston. What you find with the development of community gardens is you find a development of a sense of civic responsibility. And so actually what you find is you might think that people would start vandalizing the gardens or like pillaging the gardens, but in fact people respect other people's gardens, and there's more of a sense of ownership, combined ownership. And I think it goes back to our famous author's perspective on like more eyes on if there are more people managing the gardens, gardening all the time or at different times, then there's less likelihood that people will vandalize and or steal or.
And the fact that it's not controlled by the government, but it's controlled by like the community, like fosters that sense of like community. I guess like more people like get to know each other and that stuff, so they're less likely to like kind of take all of it for themselves, because they see other people are kind of in the same need as them, so they share it more.
Zoe?
I feel like this may not apply to cities like San Francisco, but more for the country as a whole. Something that could be a cause is like places where it's easier to export and import like fresh produce and stuff like that. I'm assuming like places where it's harder to even like get a hold of fresh produce.
Yep.
That would cause a food desert. Also, there are stores like Grocery Outlet. We have one in Pacifica, but they take like bigger brand markets like expired food that's not actually expired, and they'll sell it at discounted
Promo prices.
prices.
Huh? Promo price?
Yeah. And so that's like a solution that's happening.
So just like my grandma lives in Sonoma, and there's a community garden around there, and you see it's like also good for like elderly people also, because a lot of places where like people retire and more like country-ish side areas and like suburban places, and I feel like there's probably more of like food deserts where like things aren't as dense, and so like with knowing that like a lot of people retire in places that are quieter, like it's probably also good for like maybe their mental health or something.
Yeah, that's actually one of the interesting things about food deserts is that one of the most common areas for food deserts to be in is farms where fresh produce is produced. Obviously, farmers can't just like pick off the fruit from their farm.
It was recording.
So now everyone knows soccer 10.
Alex is unfiltered.
Okay, so yeah, so here are basically the main sources of food deserts or causes of food deserts that experts have come up with. Definitely education was a big factor where people would choose convenience over health and would not know exactly what to buy when they went to a supermarket or a grocery store, even if they did have one. Poverty cycle is a big issue. It ties into redlining and zoning, where people trapped in the poverty cycle have lack of access to public transportation and other services that could help them with good spending choices with their fresh food. And then the other factor in that is that the poorer people are, the less time they have, especially since they have jobs to do, they have kids to feed, they have places to go, and they don't really have time to spend an entire day trekking over to a different part of Oakland, for example, just to get some vegetables for the week, especially when they can get the same amount of food for a much less distance. And then health issues, that's another self-perpetuating problem, because the more unhealthy food you eat, the less healthy you are, the less likely you are to go out on foot and go on public transportation to get groceries. So that's actually proved to be a pretty big problem with people who are stuck in that cycle. So we're going to watch a very short video by CNN on the solutions that Mr. Brisbane touched on a little bit, and hopefully that'll give some more context.
If you can imagine flying into LAX, the pilot will say we're coming into Los Angeles, the weather is great. Look out the window to your right and you'll see Hollywood. And if you look out the left window, you'll see the rest of South Los Angeles, which is an ocean of communities. You will not see any grocery stores when you look out the left side of your window of the plane. You just won't. It's not just. It's an unjust system. Communities get left behind by the free market as far as access to healthy food options. A good example would be the 8 Council District. The average resident who lives in that council district drives 12 miles round trip just to get to a grocery store that has healthy food available to them. So that's a lot of Los Angeles. These are areas where oftentimes the fast food industry will infiltrate. It really perpetuates the cycle of obesity and diabetes among especially migrant communities and people of color.
Everybody here has the Opportunity to Picture project. And so I said, okay, well, I have an idea. Let's do something about food deserts, because I live in a food desert. And so let's see if we can do something utilizing technology to help people that have an immediate need to access healthy food.
Food Oasis is a map of food resources in the city and county of Los Angeles. So whether it's food pantries, food banks, community gardens, or farmers markets, we list them all here. And so based on the person's location, we can basically show them, okay, well, there's a farmer's market here, did you know about that? And then they would be able to find the food pantry that they might not have known existed.
The it is high tech. You know, we are using cutting edge programming and coding and all that stuff. And what's fascinating is that we're really using it to address something that's as low tech as you can get, which is growing food and then distributing it and sharing it with the community. Aloha!
Welcome to the garden. Volunteer here, and I've been showing my son what it means to grow your food, where it actually comes from, and also providing for ourselves, you know what I mean? Being able to kind of supplement the small income that I have because I'm a single mom. I used to be a preschool teacher, and a lot of my students didn't know the difference between a tomato and a potato because they come from a lot of low-income families. Fresh fruits and vegetables are really hard to come by, or whatever the case may be. So having this access, this space, emotionally, I mean, it definitely lifts my spirit because it's something that I've been wanting to do.
So this one's winnable. And I think that's really what's fun about it, is that this is so winnable. Like, we can turn our
Oh, you
food
recognized
system
it.
around. And of course we have to, because we have to globally grow as much food in the next 40 years as we have in the last 40,000 years combined. At the end of the day, this is about empowerment and empowering communities with new tools. Hopefully, one of the byproducts of that process will be healthier children and fuller stomachs.
I did a grill. Yeah, that's the last meal.
All right. So that's an interesting angle you can see of some solutions that people have come up with. The last thing I'll talk about briefly is one of the other major solutions that have been implemented, which is the Let's Move campaign by Michelle Obama. You probably heard about it during Obama's presidency, reign of a lot of encouragement to get to know fruits and vegetables a lot more and how to buy them and eating healthy for teens in low income areas. So this is what this is. What they've basically achieved is they've had a lot of tax breaks for supermarkets that go to low income areas and food deserts, which encourages grocery stores to get to that area. And then the other thing it's accomplished is obviously to raise awareness for eating healthy and how to buy healthy. So that's a solution to think about. Thanks.
All right, if you can give James